Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar on how to get the most out of the Benchmark Installer app. We're here with Chris Jessop from Benchmark. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Welcome all.
And we've got Neil Watson from Benchmark as well. Welcome, Neil. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Joe. Hello, everybody.
A bit of housekeeping before we start. We've got the chat box here to the right, and there's an Ask a Question button underneath. If you've got a question as we go, please use the comment box or that Ask a Question button, and we'll get those answered for you. So just to kick off, we're going to hand over to Neil, who's got a quick demonstration of the app for you, and then we'll go over some FAQs afterwards. So Neil, over to you.
Right, so this is my my mobile phone, just connected into the meeting. And here on the top right-hand side, I have the Benchmark app. And the first thing it asks to do is to log on. Now, obviously, I'm already logged on as a user of the system. So I'm just going to quickly run through how you would, what the features are of the app. So down the bottom here, excuse me, you have an opportunity to add a new installation, to add a service, or to go to settings. And on the settings view here, you can see your profile, frequently asked questions, terms and conditions, etc., etc. Now, within the profile for a user, what you need is a gas safe license number for the individual installer, an email for that individual installer, the company gas safe number, and also a company email down the bottom of the profile. That's all covered on installation when you first go into the app. So I'm going to jump back out of settings, and I'm going to go straight to installation and show you how you would set up a new install on the app. So I'm just going to click the button here that says new installation. It offers you an opportunity to do this via an external manufacturer's loyalty app. I don't have that on my phone, so I'm just going to skip that. And it brings me up the screen, which shows me the boiler for me to select. So if I click on the boiler, what that does is it gives me a drop-down menu with all of the boilers associated with the Benchmark scheme here. Now you can either enter a code manually or you can scan a QR code. So I've got the new install screen that's come up here, and I can it has a drop-down list of all of the boiler manufacturers associated with the scheme. In this instance, I'm going to add an ideal boiler, and I hit that scan button, hit confirm, and it pulls me up as a Atlantic Combi 24 boiler, and it's added the serial number. So I just click on next. And it asks me where this installation is. So I'm going to stick in the installation postcode. Okay, and it's got to look up, so it will find that address from the postcode, and it's populated all of the address requirements there. I'm going to stick the installation date as for today. And confirm that heating and hot water system complies with appropriate building regulations, really important, and time temperature controlled boiler lock provided for central heating and hot water. Okay, so that's all done. The one thing you'll notice is that there, next to some of the drop down boxes, is a little red asterisk, and that asterisk signifies any data which is mandatory. So if I just unclick one of those, the boiler interlock, for example, you'll see that the next button at the bottom blanks out. Click it back on, a mandatory field. I can now move to the next field. Okay. The next field covers the requirements of Boiler Plus, weather compensation, load compensation, etc., etc. There's also a separate box on the bottom for any installation that's in Scotland, because Scotland doesn't have the Boiler Plus requirements. So I'm just going to tick one of those. I'm going to tick weather compensation. Then it's asked me a few questions, whether it has pre-existing zone valves, whether we're fitting zone valves or whether they're not required. I'm going to say they're not required. Similar for thermostatic radiator valves, going to say they're pre-existing. An automatic bypasser system, again, I'm just going to select pre-existing. An underfloor, let's say we're going to add some underfloor heating during this install. And again, because all the mandatory fields are clicked, the next button comes up. Now, this then asks us all of the requirements about water quality for the system. Now, this is really, really important because we do know that around about 80% of failures of systems within the first 2 years of install are down to water quality issues. This is a really important screen. So you'll notice that the first thing it asks is whether you've cleaned and treated the system in accordance with BS 7593 2019 and boiler manufacturer's instructions. So 2 things for you to look at. It asks you what brand of cleaner was used. And again, it has all of the products associated with the scheme. So in this case, I'm going to choose Ideal Cleaner. And the Ideal Cleaner is called System Cleaner. So you've got a brand and a product. What inhibitors used, I'm going to select ADEY in this instance. And I'm going to use ADEY MC1 Plus Protector. It then asks me for an inhibitor identification number, not necessary because it's not a mandatory field, but you are required to confirm that you have you've checked the level of concentration of that inhibitor, and it asks you which specific test has been used. Now, there's a number of tests on the market. One of them is an alkalinity test. So I'm going to select that I've done that via alkalinity, and that's a drop test. Okay, and this is an opportunity for you to put the result into that screen as well. So we can say that's a drop test and it's passed. And it then asks you with regards to a primary water system filter. You can either select that there's already a filter on the system or you're fitting one. There is no option not to fit one because having a filter on the system is now a requirement. So I'm going to check that as fitted. And again, let's say we're going to use an ADEY filter and we're going to use let's say a Micro 2. So again, now that all of the mandatory fields are filled in, I can press that next button and it then starts to ask me around the gas rates. So in central heating mode, a gas rate of, let's say, 3 meters cubed per hour. We're going to leave that at factory settings. Gas inlet pressure is 20 millibars. Flow temperature of 70 and return temperature 50. So that's all standard stuff. We've checked that it's balanced, or we've rebalanced the system, and again the next screen pops up. That allows us to move on. Now, if we're fitting this in a hard water area, check the button yes. There is now a requirement, you see the red asterisk again, to have a scale reducer on that, and we're going to get again say we're going to fit one of those, and we'll fit in this instance, let's fit a Fernox scale reducer, and we'll fit an electrolytic scale reducer from Fernox here. Water meter fitted, yes or no. Pressure reducing valve, not a mandatory field, so I'm just going to skip that and hit yes. Next. Domestic hot water mode. So ask me again for the gas rate and the gas inlet pressure. So let's say 20 again for that. Cold water inlet, let's say 25. Hot water checked at all outlets. Again, it's not a mandatory field. And I'm going to click next. Then ask me what I'm doing with the condensate disposal. Here, the requirement is to follow what's stated in 5546 or BS 6798. So I'm going to say we've done that. Point of termination is going to be external. Method of disposal, gravity. Click next. It's asking me for the carbon dioxide reading. So I'm going to say it's 100. Sorry, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, 9 done. Carbon monoxide again at minimum flow rates. Again, we're going to use 109. It's asking if you've done a flue integrity check. Well, I've done that. We've demonstrated and explained the operation of the boiler to the customer. We've done that, and we've left the required literature with the customer. And again, you see the pop-up box. This then allows us to add a signature from the engineer. And also, this is the point where you can ask your customer to sign the app as well. And it asks the customer whether they would like to receive a service reminder either from the installer or from the manufacturer. I'm going to choose the installer in that instance, and we'll take that and finish. Now that's how easy it is to go through an installation. And you've then got a final screen here where you can add a customer's email in order for them to receive a copy. So okay, going to add a customer's email address and press the send button, and that sends a copy of that installation report directly to the customer. Same thing applies with a service. Okay, so this is the service screen for the boiler. In this instance, it's a Worcester boiler. Going to click on the next button, and it allows me to either start a new service. It records all the services that you've had below. Hit the start a new service, and it brings up again the screen asking for your CO2 values, and then the screen following that is the water treatment requirements for the service, remembering that you do need to check the inhibitor level and the cleanliness of the system at service as well. So very, very easy app to use. You can save a service. You can save a service at any point during the installation and go back and complete it up to 3 months later. And that is the Benchmark app.
Cool. No, perfect. Thanks a lot for that, Neil. Looks fantastic. So now we've got some installer questions for Chris and Neil. If you have a question, drop it in the comment section or the ask a question button underneath, and we'll get those answered for you as well. So Chris, this app looks fantastic for installers. How much work from Benchmark has gone into this?
Thanks, Joe. There's an awful lot of work gone into this from the team as a whole. But what you've seen today is the basic app. Now, some of the questions we've had relate to where we're taking the app to, and we're not a team to actually just sit back and see what's happening with the app. We are looking actively at the moment to add the functionality to it. We've had some great customer feedback from some installers already to allow us to look to enhance the app. But we're also looking as part of the overall app is to add in other devices to this, such as cylinders, which is one question we've had, air source heat pumps, heat interface units. We're also going to expand it to commercial boilers as well as gas fires and etc. So wherever there's currently a benchmark form or a draft form, we are looking to add those to the app. We're also, one of the other questions we've been asked is about whether we can link devices via Bluetooth. And one of the key drivers for us for the app was to ensure that it was something that was very easy to use, not cumbersome for installers, but actually should save them time. So we are working with some of the major manufacturers of flue gas analyzers to actually add that functionality into the next version. so that we will link in via Bluetooth the key devices from the major manufacturers, and then have a process for adding them in from there. One of the other things that we've been asked for on here is whether you have to take photographs of the condensed pipe to show it's been installed correctly. At the moment, you don't have to. There is an option that can be added to add photographs to the system, but what we were mindful of initially was just making sure that we weren't transferring too much data across and creating instability across the networks if an installer's in a place where the signal's not great. We will look at how we proceed with that, and we will maybe add that as an optional option into the system as part of a further release down the line. You know, it is all about making this thing agile and ensuring that it is future-proof. One of the questions we've been asked that we've not included in this was initially was about tightness testing and recording the results within there. It is something that we will consider. What we've originally started with is the paper-based form, and ensuring that we've effectively brought that into the digital world. And it wasn't something that's currently a requirement of the paper-based form, but that doesn't mean to say that we can, you know, that we don't need that ongoing. So we will have a look, and we will take feedback from other installers as well to see if that's something that they would like to see added to there. There's a question on here about inhibitors test methodology. Neil, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. There's a number of different test methodologies that can be used for inhibitors. There's some simple dip tests, which just simply take a measure of one of the elements of the chemical formulation. There's other dip tests that are slightly more advanced, and there are those that feed bespoke tests that feed directly into other apps made by some of the manufacturers that can also at a later date will feed directly into benchmark. There's also an alkalinity test which has been developed as part of the benchmark scheme, which is available to use, which is a drop test that you can use with chemical bottles to add a number of drops of a particular chemical. Then you add drops of your system water to it, and it calculates quite accurately the level of concentration of the inhibitor within it. So there's a number of different methods available that you can use.
Thanks, Neil. Just moving on to one of the other questions, which is a really big one, and I think it was one that's very sensitive to everybody using the app, which is surrounding who owns the data and who owns the app. The app is owned by Benchmark. It's not owned by individual manufacturers. Individual manufacturers have access to the records for their own warranty requirements within there. You've seen on the demonstration that Neil did how you can capture from a customer's perspective who they would like to get the service reminders from. If they choose, they can choose not to have any, or they can choose to have it from either the installer, which is the first option, and then a default as a reminder just from the manufacturer that the service is required. As part of the scheme, it's absolutely critical to the success of this that data is totally ring-fenced, and the requirements to maintain the data integrity are absolutely 100%. This is not a case of just trying to create a portfolio of data that will be sold off to anybody. That will not happen. The data records on there, if your customer wants you to get the requirements for their servicing from yourselves, that message will come from the app recommending yourself for that service work, and will be available on there. It will not be used for any other purposes whatsoever, and it will not be used for marketing purposes. The data is very, very secure within the system, and as part of ensuring that integrity, we also have instigated a number of penetration tests to be carried out to ensure that it remains absolutely robust. And that's something that we'll continue throughout the process to ensure that people have the confidence that that data is there and it is secure, and it's only for the purpose it's intended for. I noticed as well there's some questions around what happens with the paper-based form and what will happen with the paper-based forms. With the advent of the digital app, the longer term goal is that the paper-based forms will no longer be required. It's simply a case of that the digital one will supersede the paper-based forms, but there will be a period of time when both will exist. Now, that doesn't mean to say that both have to be filled in. As long as one of them is filled in, that's perfectly fine. We would encourage people more so to get used to the digital app, because we genuinely believe it's easier and quicker to fill in, saves time, and also drives the service work in the future. The cut-off point was another question of when people will have to move to the digital one. We haven't hard and fast set a date for that yet, but as an industry, we want to be upfront and honest with people and say that that date will be coming. We haven't said it as yet, and we will make sure that everybody's got plenty of notice about when the paper-based forms will disappear. Because they're added by the manufacturers in their installation instructions, again, you will see a period of time where both will coexist afterwards. And again, as long as the benchmark is completed, that is perfectly fine.
And then we've got a question about for larger installation companies, how would benchmark suit those if they've got like 30 or 40 engineers on the road?
That's a work in progress at the moment, Joe. One of the installers working on the benchmark team has that as a project. If you have a number of installers and you have your own systems to record the data from all of your installs locally within your own company, then the intention is that the benchmark app will feed directly into your own company system so that you can download that data in a form that's suitable for you as a company. You don't have to reprocess that data again once your installers have used the benchmark app.
As a series of manufacturers and as part of the benchmark team, there's a lot of activity going on to encourage people to use the app, to make sure it's simpler, to make sure it does save people time and allows them more flexibility with using the app, especially once we've added additional functionality to it. So it's very much a case of, you know, we want to communicate widely on this and ensure that we listen to installers and pick up any feedback that they've got that can improve this to drive adoption. You know, we don't see this as hitting people over the head and saying you must use this, but we would hope that people will want to use it and will jump into wanting to use it. And it's our job as a team to make sure that that is the case, that it is as simple to use as possible.
I think it's worth pointing out, Chris, as well, that you don't actually need a data connection from your phone when you're logging the data from your installation. We appreciate that a lot of people, if they're working in boiler rooms, might not have an immediate connection to the internet. So you can still run through everything on the app, and as soon as the app picks up an internet connection, it will download that data. So it's not a case of there are instances when you can use it and instances when you can't use it.
No, it's a really good point, Neil, yeah, that you're making there, and it is one of the key things that we wanted adding in there, that as much as possible, it's an always available app that you can use for whenever you need to.
We've got some questions as well about linking with other manufacturers' apps, like loyalty websites and manufacturers' own versions. So what is your advice on that?
There's two key points within this. First of all, manufacturers will have their own version of benchmark. Benchmark is benchmark, and the app it has been set and been agreed by all manufacturers that it will be adopted as such. However, what we've done as part of the scheme is we've created what's called a set of APIs, which allow apps to link to each other and link to systems. So individual manufacturers will link the benchmark scheme to their own apps, but the data and the core and everything within there remains exactly as it is. we've made it as simple as possible for manufacturers as well, to ensure that however they choose to link that in with their own systems, that it will work. But fundamentally, it will capture every bit of information that you've seen on the actual app, so that whether you're accessing it via the loyalty program or via the benchmark scheme, the information is exactly the same.
Just one thing for me, Joe, I think it's really important to emphasize why this is exactly the right time for an app to come out, because we've got Part L of building regulations that's just going through a change. Government consultation has been out and is now finished, and the intention there is under the commissioning section for building services. That's section 8 in building regulations Part L. There is a requirement to install your heating system, again following BS 7593 2019, which is the methodology applied within the benchmark app. And it also states within the building regulation that the benchmark commissioning checklist, which is the benchmark digital app, can be used for confirming compliance with building regulations regardless of the heat source used. So the work that Benchmark are doing to move this forward for heat pumps, heat interface units, etc., all feeds in exactly to the requirements of building regulations. So it's a really, really convenient and easy way to prove compliance with building regulations.
There's also a consumer version of the Benchmark app as well, Chris. Can you talk us through that and how this links in with the installer version as well?
Yes, there is. There will be a consumer app that we're looking to launch later on this year. We've focused on the improvements that I talked about earlier prior to launching the consumer app. But the service messaging we spoke around earlier, it will give access to that information. It will give access to the benchmark certificate for that property, and it will give the service history for the property as a cut down version for the consumer. It will also allow us to push best advice, consumer awareness information to consumers around, changes with the renewable technologies or general gas safety advice that it will allow us to push out from there. The core work for the app is all done, but like I said, we just want to add the improvements that we're working on at the moment to the installer app, and then ensure that that links seamlessly in with the work we've done on the consumer app before we launch it. So that will be out later on this year. And again, we'll communicate out as regards when that is going to be available so people can see it. Again, what we've done with the initial version is we've replicated what's in the manual. So it's a basic record. We've added in there, just adding some parts where parts have been used so that that's a bit more intuitive. There is a question about whether we would look to add other functionality, such as adding the functionality to indicate a warning notice has been issued. Again, that is something that we will have a look at, and also pick up with a wider installer group so that we can look at whether that would add value to the system, and if it does, then it's something we would be keen to include within there.
I think that covers off all the questions. Chris, where can installers who are watching this get the Benchmark app and get more information? If they have any questions, how can they follow up?
Again, they can either go to the Benchmark website or it's available for download from the Apple Store or from Google Play.
No, perfect. We'll drop those links in there. That rounds off our session. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to Chris and Neil for your time. Don't forget to check out our Crowdcast page and installeronline.co.uk, and you can see all of our upcoming sessions and watch them all, including this one on demand. And we did a Q&A about Benchmark a couple of months ago, which you'll be able to watch and catch up on then. But thanks a lot for your time, everyone, and thank you, Neil and Chris.
Thank you, everyone.